Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Yep, we got.
I was just going to say you had a fan club, John. That's all.
I see a little bit of a Heckle Collins fan club starting early, so we're turning this face red. We'll have other red faces in starting with from the hot sauces coming later as well. But we appreciate everybody jumping on the call here this afternoon. Like I said, this morning or this evening, depending on where you're at. And we're going to break this webinar out into two sessions. The first one is going to be a panel discussion between industry experts. And we, unfortunately, one of our industry experts, Vladimir Dyshenko, was not able to participate in our webinar today. He resides in Russia, and due to obviously some risk changes on his end, won't be attending the panel session today. So apologize, he won't be able to join us, but we have a great team of folks, starting with Ken Young from Apex Clean Energy, Sean Taylor from Force Scout, and Daniel Johnson from Denexus. And I'm John Collins, also from Denexus, sitting in a VP of sales role. So we're gonna go through some Q&A around the panel here, talking about the recent events and tensions between Russia and Ukraine. Those have obviously changed considerably in the last 18, 24 hours, and that has become a hot war situation. So we respect the folks on the ground that are having to deal with that, and but are going to be talking today about what industrial and ICS and OT asset owners need to do when tensions are rising, how they can protect their systems, and some actionable planning that they can use to make sure that their systems are kept up and running as their businesses require or their critical infrastructures require. The second part of the panel is going to be around the hot ones Q&A. So Sean was nice enough to volunteer to sit on that hot seat, and he's going to have a number of escalating Scoville scale hot wings that he's going to be eating along the way. So I mentioned his face might be turning as red as mine to start this webinar, but as the hotness increases, the question intensity will also be increasing along with that as well. So if folks have questions, please put them in the Q&A area, and we're excited to go ahead and get this started. So with that, we're going to go around and do some introductions. I'll go ahead and get started, and then we'll I guess go in reverse order here of the introductions with Daniel Johnson next, Sean Taylor, and then we'll wrap up with Ken from an introduction of the panel situation. So I'm John Collins, sit in a role with Denexus, helping electric utilities expand their understanding of cyber risk across the fleet of their assets, and work with a number of different organizations to help them understand that risk and whether or not decision-making processes around the cyber risks that they have. And prior to joining Denexus, I spent 5 years working on NERC-CIP high and medium impact, mostly EMS control systems, and worked to help organizations secure those from a NERC-CIP perspective, and oftentimes just from a risk perspective as well. And prior to that role I was at Honeywell for almost 9 years doing microgrid installations. I sit here in the Washington, D.C. area, so I actually had a lot of three-letter agency type organizations from the Intel community as customers. And actually, they were the ones that kind of kicked me off into the cybersecurity world as back in 2014, as they were trying to secure those systems and those microgrids as best as possible on their campuses. So I'll leave that for my introduction, and Daniel, why don't you take it away?
Thanks. Yeah, I'm 12 years into my ICS resiliency journey, focusing mainly on electric sector. You know, it started around the time that Stuxnet was coming out with awareness efforts in DEF CON. And I went and joined 8.5 years. I worked at a power generating facility in California, renewables. And had a wide scope of responsibilities, but, I recognized how complex the solution was. We were small enough that cybersecurity was not like a dedicated focus, right? It was a component within resiliency, mainly sneaking it into operational uptime, right, and ensuring the process would continue, and had a wide berth of responsibilities, things like real-time energy management support, and things like firewalls and networks, and DCS systems and SCADA and communications and things like that. Everything very much cyber, digital, connected to the serving the industrial process. And I moved on from there to focus on software tools, which I've been doing for the last 4 years, that enable people to have enough visibility about their industrial environments to have that conversation. I've been scrolling the news as this situation involved, and this webinar had been scheduled for a month. And one of the things really hit me last night when I was reading, there's somebody from Ukraine was being interviewed about what they're worried about, right? And now there's missiles coming in, right? This thing has happened, and Russia's declared what they're going to do. And they said that they're worried about losing power and internet because it would make them feel really isolated and even further alone. And it was like, very resonated as a practitioner of the electric sector focused resiliency. For somebody, me and my North American perspective, I think, I think the things that I would think I would worry about, right? But what was really interesting is that perspective of what they worried about, because they have lost electric sector resiliency in Ukraine due to similar circumstances not long ago. And I'm sure they've had internet disruptions. So I'm just really thankful to be here as part of this conversation. I've always wanted to have this conversation more as somebody who felt like I was in too small of a bubble. I had a hard time getting people like, Ken on the call to participate with, and I'm super thankful. Maybe I can pass it over to Ken next to do an intro.
Well, sure. Thank you, Daniel. My name's Ken Young. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Apex Clean Energy. We are we're a large-scale, industrial-scale developer, owner, and operator of wind, solar, and storage facilities all across the country. We had a majority investment in our company in November, so our business model is really rapidly accelerating, and I think the stakes are a lot higher than perhaps they previously were. We've been in business for about 12 years. We are a mission-driven company accelerating the shift to clean energy. And Daniel, you tipped off on a kind of a personal approach from your readings and viewings last night. And maybe it reminded me of something. I'm in Charlottesville, Virginia, where we're headquartered, and we had a pretty heavy snowstorm in January, and we lost power. Most of the county was without power for 4 days or more, which is really unheard of in our here in the United States.
It's not Texas.
Yeah, exactly. It was our little. Certainly, we didn't have the impacts of Winter Storm Uri, but it was cold. We were kind of miserable. I haven't been in the power business now for 15 years, all renewables, and working on, putting megawatts online and making sure those megawatts are reliable and kind of live up to the obligations that we've set out for our off-takers and our investors and our key stakeholders. It just was a thought of like, man, we are so blessed in this country to not have had issues, to not be in this predicament. And when we are, just for a moment, it creates massive havoc. So to be in a position where that is threatened for ourselves or other folks don't have the same blessing that we've had, it's something that certainly makes us sit up. So I am not an expert in cybersecurity. Joke internally that I don't know what IT stands for, but someone's going to tell me. So I'm probably not qualified to be on the panel. But I think I was invited here. John and others invited me to maybe give a customer perspective and things that we worry about and things that keep us up at night. I guess the last mention, I think someone asked me to mention just a long time ago, In a previous life, I was an infantry officer in the Army. So that just informs me, from my formative years, to today. So thanks for having me.
I want to pop in and say that my career conversation is always going to be trying to recognize that people like yourself, executive stakeholders high up in the organization, right? That you are one of the most important voices because you're a leader, and I love that you recognize that that this conversation, that you are part of this conversation, and you're an important part of this conversation. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And last but not least, I want to get to the good stuff, the questions. My name's Sean Taylor. I am VP with Force Scout. I run our threat defense team comprised of cyber analysts and engineers that are outperforming hunting activities. So needless to say, I think, from here on out, things are going to get rather busy for us. Been with Force Scout 6 years. I take a much more generic approach to this topic, I think. Not necessarily focused solely on the ICS and OT world, but more from a holistic perspective, right? Because it is the problems that we're facing, specifically as it relates to this, specifically as it relates to the Russian tensions, really kind of affect everyone, every vertical, healthcare, banking, across the board. So I will probably come to it a little bit from a little bit slightly of a different perspective tonight. So happy to be part of it as well. Not really looking forward to the hot wings part at the end, though. Let me just throw that out there now.
We try to make this Q&A as long as possible, right, Sean?
There you go.
Well, it's great to have such a diverse set of panelists on this group. And I think even, what lessons learned from outside the vertical of the electric utility sector is certainly important as more and more these there's interconnections, right, in between different components of critical infrastructure. So it's great to have this diverse group here. And I'm going to go ahead and kick us off with our first question for our session here. So of course we're touchy subject in terms of how tensions have risen to a point that we're now in a full scale ground war. But in leaving kind of the politics aside and working to ensure that folks get the information to protect their critical assets. As tensions have risen over the last few months, last few weeks, and last few hours even, during this turbulent time, how do you see what changes do you see taking place in the cybersecurity space of critical infrastructure? And I think DJ, we'll kick it off with you.
Well, I really hope we do see changes that more people will realize that they're part of the conversation, right? And that they will participate inclusively in identifying and reducing risk to their organizations. I can look to CISA's announcement on the Shields Up website says, hey, yes, all organizations are potentially impacted by this thing, right? And it's a thing that is evolving fast. So part of that conversation needs to be experts, and part of that conversation needs to be leaders, and part of that conversation needs to be other people in the organization that are just looking for direction.
Yeah. Good, Sean.
Yeah, just to sort of piggyback on that, DJ, I think it's not just the onus is not just on the providers or the asset owners, right? I think there's very much an awareness from us as consumers, the threat that these asset owners, that the energy providers are ultimately under. I think most people, if you're not in the space, I think you come home from work, you pull into the driveway, you go inside and you turn on the switch, right? You put on your light, you turn on the stove, you cook dinner, right? You kind of go through the motions without necessarily having an appreciation for what it takes to ensure that voltage, that amperage gets to your house so that you can turn on the light and turn on the stove and cook dinner for your kids. There is an entire supply chain of infrastructure that is critical, right? We're talking about it, but I think the public needs to understand. I think there's probably a gleeful ignorance, maybe, that the public probably enjoys, that they don't necessarily have an appreciation for what Ken and Ken's industry counterparts need to go through in trying to understand what their risk profile looks like, right? What the assets are, right? How do they go about whatever processes and steps they need to do in order to perform the checks that, CISA recommends as part of Shields Up, for example, right? I think part of the onus, and at least being aware and understanding, also falls on the everyday public, right? We're not going to be able to enforce changes or enact things, but an awareness of that, and ultimately a willingness to take on some bit of responsibility, whether it is financially or otherwise.
For years I've been wondering when in our evolution of this digital society that we have and all the infrastructure that underpins it, when are we going to have a throwback to those Uncle Sam needs you, right, to change your password, right? Like, when is that whole art campaign going to get resurrected and really try to get past the noise that people are distracted with all their ongoing sort of lives, and say, hey, no, you're a relevant part of this solution, and ensuring the underpinnings of your civilization are can continue and be resilient.
So DJ kind of took it from the organizational level, individual contributor, Sean, very macro level. Ken, interested to hear what from an organizational level, right? What changes you might be considering?
Sure. In the last year, we've had 3 major players in our industry that have been hacked by various entities, and I'm not sure of all the details of that, but Vestas, Invenergy, and EDPR. They're a lot bigger companies than we are. I'm sure they have a lot more resources available at their disposal, but it shows that folks are not immune, and it really tips us off of we don't want to be in that situation. So what can we do? And I think our challenge is, we're experts at developing and implementing power plants, but not experts at kind of an emerging field of cybersecurity. So from my perspective, we're looking for folks that can help us define the issues, define where we have potential vulnerabilities, put in best practices, do more blocking and tackling. And I think, Daniel, you just mentioned a big one, is change our behaviors internally. I was just talking to our IT director last night in preparation for this, and he's like, we got to go to 2-step authentication. And it's just, for a kind of a entrepreneurial type company that we're doing things on the fly, that's not in our DNA. So it's something that we got to start thinking about, particularly as we put on more and more assets that are in operation. So, kind of backing up a step, I would say, we have to mesh all of this with a lot of emerging trends that are coming at us, and, find an effective solution where we've, learned and grown, but also it has to be cost effective within our, overall program. So, like other emerging issues, whether they come from the macroeconomic, safety, the commodities markets are going off the rails. This is another area or challenge to our business, and we have to take it seriously. And the reason I mentioned earlier, just 2 last points here. I mentioned earlier that we were at a majority investment from Ares earlier at the very end of last year. Is it's a great time for us to kind of redouble ourselves in making sure our business is tight and that we're executing to standards of new investors. And then the other comment I made in the introduction was about being an infantry officer. Kind of rule number 1 in that kind of setting is, security trumps everything. That's the first thing you do, is get security for your people, know where they are, make sure they're safe and secure. And that, in this case, takes on a digital connotation. So thanks.
You mentioned it a couple times, Ken, safety. And, my experience in ICS, safety and safe behaviors, behavioral safety led initiatives was a rather mature topic that we understand, right? And so for consideration, that might be an angle for trying to engage the rest of the company in appropriate places with the whole behavioral safety type of techniques.
Absolutely.
Digital
Yeah, that's what I see. I see like a real strong analogy of something we've tried through, but the kind of answer is no matter what we do to enhance safety, there still are risks and there may still be an incident. But have we taken all the prudent measures, done all the training, educated, put in systems, processes? That's a well-worn, I don't know, multi-decade approach.
And one thing to add, Ken, there is always a risk, right? And ultimately, as you're putting the mechanisms and controls and measures in place, ultimately, and this very much translates into the cyber world, is that the adage of minimizing the damage, right? So there could be an accident, someone could get injured. Let's do our best to minimize the damage to that person, right? You could get breached. Let's try to minimize the blast radius of that breach, right? Minimize the exposure across the rest of the enterprise.
Right on.
I think safety is interesting too, just because of the way that it affects the balance sheet of an organization, right? If a company has a bad safety record, right, they have a hard time retaining talented people, right? Because they're scared. They have a hard time keeping employees effective and focused on the job at hand, which can maybe have a cascading effect. It's also hard for those companies to project their revenue and income when you have these risks of people getting hurt and having costly losses related to that. So I think that the whole potential cyber impact being something that might be a periodically really significant event that could affect the company in similar ways is an interesting analogy.
Yeah, no, fantastic. We'll jump to the next question here. And we had to edit this one a little bit because recent events here in the last 24 hours have made the way we ask this question a bit obsolete. But Sean, why don't you take this one? As cyber security tensions have risen, in the Ukraine specifically over the last several months here in 2022 and, towards the end of last year, we were originally going to ask the question, was it a warning? Was it a red herring? But as tensions increase across geopolitical stakeholders, what does that mean to the industrial asset owner, and how do they manage through that?
It is going to get worse before it gets better, and that is, I think if you follow the news, if you follow the Twitter reports through the day, those kinds of things, and all of the chirping from a retaliation. I didn't see President Biden's speech, so I don't know exactly what sanctions or the amount of pain we're going to inflict on the regime, financially speaking. But ultimately, you can rest assured that that he will lash out, that they will lash out, and that he will continue to, if not allow the bad actors that are sitting within the confines of the Russian Federation to continue to exist and potentially proliferate, if not necessarily give them additional backing upon which to try and inflict damage. So you fast forward that, and Ken's world's going to get busier, right? Ken's colleagues' worlds are going to get busier. Our worlds as security practitioners are ultimately going to get busier. It is going to continue to get worse until there comes a time that things become de-escalated.
Yeah, so from a commodity standpoint, right? It's the same challenge as tensions rise, the commodity prices increase, and the fluctuations in commodity prices are rapidly evolving. So faster decision making, I would imagine, has got to be a big part of that process as more pressure is put on to the greater stability of not only nation states but organizations as well.
Well, commodity angle is interesting, John, because that's a constantly evolving and assessed value. Like things happened, and then people, and then the cost of oil was influenced directly, and when people perform once a year risk assessments or cyber assessments, or maybe, insurance policy assessments about what cyber risk is, there's this other point in time like today, right, that is also hugely relevant to assessing that. And if we can respond in our assessment in a present-based, risk-based decision, instead of taking a once a year point in time assessment, then we can respond intelligently to things like this.
Yeah. Ken, do you have any take on?
Maybe I'll just turn it back around into a question. As if we think about bad actors out there, maybe somebody in their basement or something that doesn't have anything to lose, that's one thing. But how should we, as asset owners, think about a planned state attack, multifaceted? What are like some of the immediate real-time things we should be doing? I noted we received an update from NERC this morning that said, please take a look at all your assets and provide a status report. What is it? What are some practical things that we should be doing, like in the very short run, and maybe beyond that in a more programmed approach?
So I think the first thing is recognizing, almost like risk recognition, or recognizing that this in our reality, right? There are potentially state-sponsored threats that could influence us, or that there's other entities or groups that have basically an asymmetric capability to our own, right? When we're small, I come from for me, I worked in an industrial facility for quite a while, and again, I mentioned that when I got started in that, it was in the time of the Stuxnet conversation, right? So, I was mindful that facilities like mine, rather small, likely immature in their security capabilities, were a target in that. I target because they were test grounds for more meaningful targets, right? And just a place where possibly other actors thought that they could get in and figure out how to cause, say, cyber physical impact or whatever. So for me, I had a couple strategies, and the first one was to recognize that I needed a sustainable plan, right? So it's easy to get enamored by one tactic or one policy or procedure or tool, right? But let's choose something that's right size for our organization, something we can commit to over time, right? Something that's sustainable, that we have the workforce and the budget to support. So sustainability is the first one from recommendation for me. And that's because in my organization, I recognized that security was mostly planning, time, and discipline, right? And then sometimes budget, right? Especially if I could sneak it under like the OT maintenance budget, right? So it was for me, it was comprised of those things, and because I had to sneak it into other budgets. Mostly, it was either sneaking it into other budgets or just rallying people to participate in that discretionary effort. And that's why I feel you're such an important part of the conversation, Ken, because people in your organization might feel strongly like I did and I do, and they might be making, tactical on the ground decisions, right? And they may not know that you want to participate in this conversation. They might not know who to reach out to about it, and they might be trying to commit the company to something that's not management led. I take a really CISSP type based approach to that conversation. So, you're asking for strategies. I'm going to ask you that business leaders need to be part of that conversation. How do your technical people engage you to contribute to risk management and inform security leadership?
Yeah, I mean, that's a real-time question. So we got the alert, it came up, said, from our IT director, I'm going to start making a plan, present that plan and come back. So I think you know, back to John, not hijacking your panel here, but like back to your original question, these are sustained efforts. And I think that's, you know, that's the difference here of, you know, previously we implemented SIP standards and we had probably a low risk and we weren't even aware of what the risk was. And now, I mean, you have to have your head in the sand and not know that there are potential sustained efforts to undermine, you know, our projects or potentially, you know, put us in a vulnerable spot. So, so anyway, our awareness and our engagement with our IT professionals and folks beyond them, like pushing them, what else have you thought of? You know, we don't have cybersecurity experts. We have, you know, generalists, which is very much in keeping with how, you know, certain areas of our company. So how do we expand into finding folks like you to help support our effort? So,
Sean, I think you would good.
Yeah, I wanted to go back, Ken, go back to your question about the NERC alert you got, right? And Gary posted a question online. Thank you, Gary. Gary asked, what are your top 5 low-hanging fruit ICS vulnerabilities that we could shore up now considering the risk situation, right? Which sort of parlays off of your question there, Ken. Yep. And as we had talked earlier today, I think you can't tackle it all, right? So I think you need to very much leverage DJ's comment and his answer around risk, right? And I think understanding the risk of the environment. When you look at the perimeter, I think you need to look at the criticality of devices and what potential blast radius would happen when you look at those devices. And if one of those devices were to be compromised, what's the impact, right? So I think you really need to sort of look at things holistically, but I think really getting to a point and having, and this would be for any asset owner, is, and hopefully it's not too late now, but and there's a reason it's the #1 control from CIS, right? And this very much parlays over into this, but get an asset inventory, get an HWAM, a hardware asset management, get an inventory in place and have an understanding that you can now understand all of these assets that are on your network, and you can start to assign some risk, right? And whether it's a risk from a mission criticality, risk from an internet exposure, risk from an adjacency to either an internet exposed device or a critical device from a power gen distribution, what have you perspective, right? And make sure that from an external perspective that you've got things locked down, that you don't have any, you know, it goes to principal least privilege, and make sure that you've got the really truly locked down as much as you can from a remote access perspective, that you've got the appropriate configurations internally on your firewalls and on your configurations. You don't have remote desktop exposed, right? You don't have these things that the actors tend to, right? There is kind of the low-hanging fruit. It's not necessarily specific, Gary, to ICS devices, but the low-hanging fruit you always tend to see from a threat actor's perspective are things like SMB shares, are things like RDP, right? Whispergate leveraged the installation of a, you know, AnyDesk remote desktop tool, right? So things like that, getting down to the basic sort of fundamental hygiene. I wouldn't be able to answer, Gary, specific ICS vulnerabilities in your environment without getting an understanding of what vulnerabilities exist in your environment, right? The vulnerabilities themselves are going to be operating system, are going to be firmware, are going to be device type and layer through a Purdue model dependent, right? So I think get that, and John started to mention this, type this earlier, but get an asset inventory in place, understand what the criticality and risk of those devices are, and then kind of start from there, and just literally all hands on deck, make sure that those devices are hardened to the greatest extent possible, right? And literally go line by line, starting with the perimeter, because that's where they're going to try to come in, right? And then make sure that you've got the appropriate, you know, sort of moats around from this concentric circle perspective around the enterprise.
And you got to prioritize, right? If you're taking on this task in a triage situation, right? So you got to definitely prioritize the most critical assets, probably starting out with your control center, working your backup control center, and then your most critical field assets out there. in terms of what infrastructure is supportive of probably your most profitable plants out there and or most critical plants. So it's definitely a time to prioritize and do all the security controls that Sean and Daniel had mentioned. But it's definitely that prioritization is key, and it's got to be based on the business metrics, right? From a criticality standpoint, from an operational standpoint, from a revenue standpoint as well.
One perspective on vulnerabilities I want to share is I don't feel that vulnerabilities is limited to CVEs and things on the NVD, right? Like vulnerabilities can be, people related lack of awareness and too much access, or not managing access that has came and gone, and that if we are probably to think about the top 5 vulnerabilities that your organization should be prioritizing, it's not all going to be things on the NVD, right? The National Vulnerability Database. Some of that is going to be like access management and things of that nature. So too many weak points, not enough resiliency, and poor passwords and things like that.
Great. Well, we'll probably head up against one of the last questions here, but one of them that we have Ken on, I know Daniel was eager to hear, but Ken, from your perspective, sitting at the C-level suite, what gets your attention when outside of a ground invasion taking place in Eastern Europe, what gets your attention in terms of making cyber a priority in your organization outside of days like today?
I think I've mentioned it, but I'll just kind of come back to it. To see other organizations publicly struggle is like an alarm bell. Again, I hate to go back to, I'm the king of analogies, but it's kind of like when you have another site has a safety issue. It's not related to you at all, but it should make you take notice and maybe do your own safety stand down and revisit that issue. So, seeing our peers or vendors or competitors kind of struggle with issues, and then knowing probably, thinking about what's going on in that organization during that time, like how do we stay out of that area? What can we do today that maybe doesn't, change the world for us and maybe makes things a little less comfortable or cost some time and some resource investment, but keeps us, out of a place, that just would probably seem, detrimental to the whole organization and kind of bring it to its knees in a short time frame. So that's, all of this kind of bubbling in the press and right in front of us is creating and sparking awareness in our company. My boss, our CEO, came to work yesterday and said, "What are we doing? Where are we going?" And it was just like a shot. And I said, "Hey, I'm sitting on a panel talking about this stuff. So this is kind of real time." And then we're, NERC is surfacing and we're creating plans, and but this has to be a sustained effort beyond this, and it's got to be one of our core work streams as we go forward here.
So what I'm hearing is some practitioners could use related to the industry at hand, right? And be really involved in a lot of those industry groups where you are hearing some of the direct impacts that take place to similar organizations, and either in the supply chain or direct competitors, like you said, but really take part of a lot of that industry sharing of knowledge is a good way to get that attention.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds right on, John. I would just say I would not want to be sitting there responding to my boss or our investors, and the question is, okay, you had an attack, something happened. What were your preparations for it? And I have nothing to say, and I like the way Sean characterized it earlier. Like, well, here are the steps we took, and here's how we thought the process might go, and here's what we mitigated. And to that end, that's where we want to be, is sitting on the side of, we took reasonable and prudent measures, given the threat that's out there. So
a measured risk strategy that you can have documented and can have in place and said, here's the sheet of music we followed. It, may or may not have been effective, but we were following a process and made some structured decisions around that process.
Yeah,
great.
That's right.
Thanks. Sean, do you have some folks in the room? Are we ready to switch on over to your wing?
We're ready. I need to switch into a different Zoom and then brace myself. So yes, we're ready to switch over whenever you're ready.
All right. Well, why don't you go ahead and jump into the literal hot seat on this front, and we'll have some lessons learned with Sean, and watch him eat some hot wings while we're doing it. While we're waiting for that, DJ, did you have any other input in response to Ken? I know that was one of your hot questions you wanted to kind of learn about.
Thanks for that. Because I've been asking, I've been trying to find out, based on these escalating tensions with Russia and Ukraine, how many people are making a different deliberate decision in the last week or two because of that? How many people? And I love that your CEO went to you, and that for you and your CEO, it's both yes, right? That you have done something deliberately, mindfully in response, a cyber risk-based decision action in response to the evolving landscape. So I got a little poll on LinkedIn. If anybody wants to pop in there, look me up and answer that, would be awesome. Thank you so much.
Awesome. And I'll even kind of reiterate that I struggled from a business development selling perspective to get the attention of when I was with Honeywell, of industrial asset owners, that you're a very large governmental target, and these are some fairly large backdoors that based on these systems that have been here for 25 years, that have been migrated from different versionality, and each version of that has more connectedness to it. So working with organizations that frankly you kind of scratch your head curiosity why there aren't more red flags going off is something that I've struggled with over there. So we appreciate that input, Ken, to really align it with your industry verticals. All right, Sean, I'm gonna go ahead and add your pin here. These guys are doing this from a site in Europe right now too, so we got a time frame difference, and they were very diligent to go out and find some wings in Europe, so we appreciate that. But I guess we are still turning that on.
Let me put something in there to fill the space, because it's something that I've recognized in my career. A lot of these facilities have a way of responding or recovering in the event of loss of communication or loss of DCS or SCADA. But what I don't think a lot of people realize is the human cost to trying to staff that manual operation, and to the increased safety risk when everybody's just trying to keep the thing running. So I just wanted to put that out there, that when we're assessing cyber risk, a lot of companies for now still have manual processes they can revert to, but let's not forget how costly that is to the people, and then how inefficient that can be to the company's revenue too, because when these DCS and SCADA systems are there for a reason. So I'll throw that 2 cents in. Sean,
thanks, Daniel. All right, well, we got the hot ones wings set up, and for some of you that want to play along, I think there's some winners out there of some hot sauces. So if any of you are out there, play along with Sean.
The saying, misery loves company.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Misery definitely loves company. So for those that aren't familiar, hopefully you are. I was not familiar prior to agreeing to this. If I was, I probably would not have agreed to it. There's this entire web series hosted by a guy named Sean Evans. So our CTO, Rob Ignut, is going to be your very personal Rob. You're cut out.
All right. Can we push the laptop back a little bit?
Yep.
We're coordinating here. We're trying to
We had to adapt things at runtime. The Zoom room wouldn't let me get in as a panelist. So anyway, we've got a handful of questions, a handful of probably incredibly hot sauces.
Let me read this.
I don't expect. One is called the bomb. This one is the bomb. So for those that are hot sauce fanatics, or this one is called the last dab. It is 2 million Scoville units. I'm not even really sure exactly what that means.
Nothing. You got this.
But so yes, so we've got some questions. I'm going to be answering questions. I have an assortment of things that I'm going to use to try and
This is the not hottest one.
keep me from crying. That's number one.
Oh, good. This is what I'll try.
That's the easy one. I've got some. I'm over here in our Badera research labs over in the Netherlands. So I've got some Dutch milk. I've got some beer. I've got some water. I've got peanut butter, and I've some bread. So, all right.
You said Dutch milk. Is Dutch milk any different than?
It just says milk.
Milk.
So, all right. Give me the first question.
All righty. Let's see if we shuffle these up so you don't remember. How is Force Scout working with the U.S. government to respond to certain threats?
Well, there's multiple, and as was mentioned earlier on the call, DJ mentioned it. It's just as an organization underneath Department of Homeland Security, they've got multiple sort of sub-organizations that really allow for information sharing, threat sharing. So we're a member of one of those organizations, and are providing threats, providing vulnerabilities, and sharing what our research organizations ultimately able to detect. So I will hand this off.
All right. Let's see. Let's see if he was right. Test this one. Make sure it's not too easy.
Okay, that's a good start. That's a good warm up. Not bad. I would love to hear if anybody else is trying them on the call. We've got close to 40 or so attendees. So if you ordered some, got one shipped to you, would love your thoughts. All right,
Next one. Some of your recent threat assessments, what stands out as the most dangerous or bad behavior?
So this is Dawson's hot sauce. It's a cedar smoked garlic. I mean, it sounds pretty benign and like fancy, but it's a heat meter of 5 out of 10. So yeah, I'm sure this is going to sting a little bit. Honestly, what tends to be, oh my God, I'm going to regret that. What I think tends to be kind of funny is that you end up in a situation where it's the latest vulnerability or the latest threat. Like, Log4j kind of started things off, right? And then Whispergate was working with a utility in the U.S., helping them trying to identify Whispergate, if they're vulnerable to Whispergate, if they have been compromised from a Whispergate perspective. I mean, Log4j really kind of started it from a threats perspective, and ultimately, what was really interesting about the engagement of when we hunted for Log4j was we found some Log4j, but we found so many other things around additional vulnerabilities, around additional things that just really pointed to poor hygiene, basics, fundamentals that were certainly things that ultimately, if not fixed, would be exploited.
That one's all right. It's got a little bit of kick.
It does have a little bit of a kick. It's
highly recommended. Dawson's. You guys are chance to try it. Go for it. All right. Next one.
Is it bad when your nose starts running already?
On one too.
What do you see as the biggest threat to critical infrastructure?
Well, we kind of touched on this a little bit, right? Lips are starting to burn a little bit.
Is that number 3?
It's number 3. I think, and again, when we talked about, the question was asked by Gary on the session about exactly what are the ICS vulnerabilities. I think DJ, you brought up a very interesting aspect that it's not NBD CVEs necessarily that are probably the biggest risk. I think you probably end up in a situation where the maybe one of the biggest risks that you can easily, without having to make an investment in technology, that you can look at the people, you can look at security, you can look at accounts, you can look at permissions, you can figure out how you can work yourself to a point of implementing principle of least privilege.
You should work yourself to a point of taking a bite.
That's gonna hurt.
Smells a little spicy.
It's kind of thick, like a paste.
Yeah, this one's a little dangerous.
All right.
1 million Scoville.
That was 1 million?
I'm just kidding.
No. That wasn't too bad. All right.
All right.
What do we got? How are we doing on? We've got a couple more minutes.
All right. Let's speed this up. How about I take a wing right now, and then we'll get
All
the
right,
next
there you
question.
go.
Take a bite.
Got it.
And speed it up.
Okay. This is the Phoenix. They try to tease you. Cantaloupe, melon, and Scotch bonnet.
Oh, that's a good one. Scotch bonnet used to be the hottest pepper.
No.
Yeah, speed it up so we can get to the tiers.
Yeah, we're going.
Oh, that's interesting. Oh my God. Okay. All right. Question.
All right, let's get a short answer to this one. What types of organizations do you feel will be affected most by nation-state attacks? It's an easy one.
Healthcare, critical infrastructure, government.
All right, next wing.
Whew. Whew. This is got a little Hispanic flair to it. Los Calientes.
Let's give it a shot. Let's see. I'll give my professional opinion.
Oh, that would be good. That would be good on like nachos. All right.
Next one. I'm gonna give this one a shot. Let's see.
Oh.
The U.S. government has published guidelines for zero trust for IoT and OT. How do you interpret implementing controls to enforce zero trust?
Oh.
Like, is it the question that's making you hot, or
the? Well, the question I was expecting it, but I wasn't expecting it so early. I think getting to a point of, and this is supposed to be dessert. It's a cocoa ghost hot sauce. I think honestly, again, getting to a point of really least privilege and establishing, you got to have trust. You got to trust the user. You've got to make sure that the user has got the right authentication and privileges and authorization. But it's not just the user; it's the device. It's all of it. I don't know. It scares me for any organization that's truly looking to implement zero trust.
I bite you're about to think scares me. How is it? You're doing good.
I'm actually feeling
into the peanut butter yet.
Feeling okay that I'm not making the mistake of letting it touch my lips. Okay.
All right.
Oh.
Get the next one teed up.
13 angry scorpions.
I think I want to have you eat the wing, then I ask the question.
Okay. All right. I'll get ready.
All right. What kinds of threats does your team search for?
Like hot sauce. That's a hot one. Right now, we are focused on threats that are vulnerabilities from a traditional CVE perspective. We are looking for, excuse me, IOCs that are able to be detected based on patterns, based on traffic, communication, CNC calls, those types of things. We are looking for other traditional things that are anomalous, that are poor hygiene, that are insecure communications, invalid certificates, telnet-based communications. Oh my Lord, the heat is forming. Things
My
like
Lord, tell me.
SMB.
I think we need to get to the next wing.
I know, we got to get to the next wing. Oh my God. All right, the bomb.
We'll spend more time on the last two bottles. Don't worry.
Okay, this is the bomb.
Yeah, these are certainly hot over here. I'm so glad we switched places.
Shut up. For the record, he was supposed to do this, but then, considering he's my boss, he pulled the rug out from under me.
He made a risk-based decision as a leader, so I applaud you for that.
That's even enjoyable.
All right, ready for the question? Yeah. How do you feel about the current climate and tension with Russia and Ukraine will affect the cybersecurity landscape?
It's a hot one.
Oh, and I kind of touched on this on the phone. Huh?
So that's a hot one.
It's bad. That's bad. The bomb is bad. It is not the bomb. Oh my Lord. It is going to get worse. I said this one earlier. Oh my God, it's continuing to.
That's what the bottle says too. It's going to get worse.
It is going to get worse. Across the board for every vertical I mentioned. Oh my Lord, earlier. It's going to continue to escalate the attacks.
Oh, this was the world champion, the World Hot Sauce Awards.
There you go. For putting people through misery. Yeah, it's going to continue to escalate. It's going to continue to get worse.
This was made with scorpion peppers. Right?
There
Scorpions.
you go.
They're almost the hottest.
Scorpion peppers existed.
I forget what the hottest is. Isn't it the
I don't know.
I think somebody has,
The ghost pepper, right? This is ghost pepper?
No, I think it's the not the ghost. It's the not the scorpion.
Oh. It's the Apollo pepper. The the new hottest pepper from Guinness World Records by now is like.
Well, there we have it. We knew we would figure it out.
Oh my gosh.
All right.
All right.
Wing question. We've got two more questions.
Two more questions? Okay.
Yes.
All right. This is, I don't even know that I can say this. This one is called Pucker Butt. So apologies, but that's what it's called. Oh my God. Okay.
I would jump in as a quick reminder for we had 40 giveaways of the hot ones, hot sauce. Some folks haven't given their address for us to ship that to. So if you could get the address to us, we'll ship you out that hot ones wing sauce. So you too can experience what Sean's going through right now.
All right.
Misery. Okay.
What's the number one recommendation you can provide to the people that are watching this? Let me take a bite, and then we'll.
I just did one. You were one behind. Oh,
I'm out of wings.
That is awful. Get a complete understanding of what is on the network. The adage, you cannot secure what you cannot see. You cannot patch what you cannot, like all of that. Get an understanding of what's on the network. And then once you're able to do that, then you can manage the devices, you can patch the devices, you can do all of these things, but you have to have a foundational understanding of what's on the network. I think first and foremost.
All right. Last one. Let's cue it up. I'm actually going to make this question up.
Look at that. Oh, my Lord.
I
know we're running over, folks. If you drop.
This is an easy one. This is a softball. It's like that sauce is probably easy.
Oh, let's see.
Come on,
It's a
put a
dab.
little
That's
more
what
on
it
there.
says.
Come on.
You literally, that's what the post does. They put it, it's just a dab.
There you go. So that's more of a dab. That was like a droplet.
Oh, my Lord. All right, what you got?
Make a prediction on the name of the next malware that will hit organizations in the U.S. We had WannaCry, we had Whispergate. Come up with a creative name. See if you can get out there and get the prediction.
This is where the swearing might start.
I'm trying hard, John. Anybody
You
that's
said
watching
you
these
were doing
videos,
great.
the celebrities swear, they curse. It is, I was like, you know what? This is going to be recorded. I need to be respectful. Oh my Lord.
Is that the name of the next malware?
I'm going to say pucker butt. The pucker butt malware. That's it. You heard it here first.
All right.
That's it from us, John.
He's made it through all 10.
I did.
Impressive.
All right. Well, we appreciate you doing that, Sean, and drink up that milk there and have a beer and enjoy.
There you go.
We appreciate you being coerced by your boss to do that, I suppose.
Voluntold. I did not volunteer.
Rob, we appreciate you jumping in and eating along
Sure.
and asking some of those questions. So with that, it concludes.
I was cheating, but yeah.
You'll hear that. We have a good recording of where pucker butt malware comes from.
Evidence.
So, but with that, again, if you didn't send us your address, we are going to get you some of the hot ones, hot sauce as well. So if you could please enter that information and we'll get that shipped out to you. And we appreciate everybody jumping on for the webinar today. And thanks for your time. And if you have any specific questions for DeNexus or Force Scout, please reach out and through emails. And thanks for jumping on.
All right. Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
guys.
Okay. See you, everybody. Thank you.
Not too bad.